After a long hiatus, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Peter.
Brian Trolls, Attack on Bitcoin.
Yep.
The legend.
I mean, if you are not attacking Bitcoin, do you even really care about it?
What a question. Can you come in closer to the mic? Because you've got a muffle on.
We'll pull the mic to you.
What do you think, Danny?
I think that makes me an attack on Bitcoin because I don't care about any of this stuff. I just like watching it.
Your ambivalence is an attack on Bitcoin. Huh. I don't know. Tell me.
I mean, like, this is a distributed system with a million different participants all doing their own thing in sync. If we are not trying to find the ways that it can break, that it can fall apart or fall out of sync, then what are we even doing here? Are we just LARPing and hoping that a fragile thing doesn't get hit in the wrong way and break and just trying to prevent people from even hitting it? Or are we actually going to try and see, can it hold up to getting smacked real hard?
So is there white hat and black hat attacking Bitcoin?
I would say yes.
Yeah, so there's genuine attackers just trying to rob it blind, and there's people who love Bitcoin who are trying to strengthen it by attacking it.
Yeah, I mean, like, as much as I think Udi is a giant numbnuts, I really don't think he is like trying to harm Bitcoin with all of this inscription JPEG wizard shenanigans. I think that he has consistently said that things like NFTs and all this other garbage are like just things that he doesn't see as a scam. Like, he doesn't see as something illegitimate or unethical, and he's bringing that back to Bitcoin.
Who's that?
Baldy.
That guy. Yeah, look, like, whatever. I mean, I got my views. So we've been discussing this a lot this last 2 weeks, right? And I think the important thing is you take in information and views and then kind of either reaffirm your position or establish a new one. So one thing yesterday at BitDevs that you said, like, shifted my position. You said basically there's no ways you can stop people putting arbitrary data in Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Any single way you try and stop it is still going to happen.
Yep.
I mean, is that 100% true?
That is 100% true. I don't know if you guys have been following the Red Team meme on Twitter, but me, Rob Hamilton, Rindell, Post Capone, and a bunch of other people, in the course of arguing with everybody who wants to try and filter these transactions out, we have literally already figured out every way, like, that you can just jam arbitrary data into the blockchain, to the point that you can rip every piece of Bitcoin script, every feature out of it, except sending money to a public key. And we can still use that public key in order to write arbitrary data to the blockchain.
Right.
Like,
okay.
you can feasibly just grind a valid public key where the last chunk of it is the arbitrary data that you want to write, and then just send money to it.
So there's no point then having a, you have to come to an acceptance that ordinals are a thing, JPEGs are a thing, BRC20, all of this is a thing. Just accept it, which I've come to. I've accepted it. Would I do anything with it? Probably not. I've got no interest in it. Bitcoin's money to me. That's what I care about. That's what I care about when we make the show. That's what I care about when we make films. That's what I care about. Okay, so I've established that. I can, though, raise the things that I've been thinking about that. And so I've got a couple of things that I'm thinking about with this. Okay, and the two of them are, firstly, is the culture within Bitcoin shifting away from move slow, don't break things, to move fast. We want this stuff. Oh, but we don't fully understand the consequences later on. We'll deal with that. Let me give you both, and then we'll deal with it. And then the second one is, we used to be Bitcoin, not blockchain, and all this degeneracy was happening elsewhere. And when people would attack crypto, we would say, or I would say, that's not me. I'm Bitcoin. I'm money. Bitcoin's good money. It's the best form of money. All that crap is happening on these other chains that I don't care about. That degeneracy now comes into our chain. And the thing I compared it to was back whenever it was when WikiLeaks wanted to start using Bitcoin, and Satoshi pretty much said, we don't need this heat right now. And it's just unnecessary heat at a time where we're trying to say, to investors, like you should have this in your portfolio. We're trying to convince people this is the best form of money. 21 million is like super important. It fixes the world. Censorship resistance is important. Permissionless systems are important. Oh yeah, but by the way, here's some fucking I don't know, what is it? Cats and monkey JPEGs. I don't care. People do whatever they want. To me, it's just an annoying distraction. I then also appreciate the minders saying this is good for us. So like, I'm just trying to navigate this all.
Well, as far as a cultural shift, there is definitely one happening. As far as whether that goes to the like full stupid point of like, we are not going to think cautiously, we're just going to add anything like somebody comes up with to Bitcoin and see what happens. I think that's completely yet to be seen if it goes to that point. But there is absolutely a cultural shift happening. I would say I am actually like part of shifting. Like I am at the point where most of the people who would call themselves like maxis or laser eyes, I think they're just total morons. Okay. I think they are people who have read like a little Cliff Notes or a single book like the Bitcoin Standard and then got this idea in their head that Bitcoin is magical and perfect. And just because there are 21 million coins and nothing else, it will eat the entire world and it will destroy governments and we'll just have a perfect utopia. And that's completely, utterly delusional. If we stop changing Bitcoin right now, there is no way that even 1% of 1% of the planet will be able to afford to actually hold their own keys, to actually like sovereignly control their own Bitcoin. And everybody else, it's just pick your custodian, pick who you trust to hold your Bitcoin for you. And you won't even have the recourse of, well, I want to take that, like give it to me, because it's just not going to be cost effective.
Okay, that's interesting. I don't know how much or if you even still listen to the show, but do you know the question I've been asking over and over again?
No, I haven't watched any podcasts in probably like over a year at this point.
Okay, so, well, look, for about, how long has this been going on? 6 months?
At least 6 months,
yeah. Keep asking people this just one question. Like keep not getting a solid answer for us. Can you be self-sovereign if you do not control a UTXO? Can you be self-sovereign on layer 2? And I get some, well, possibly, you know, we might have this UTXO sharing, or if you use this wallet, you know, you can rent space, rent liquidity, and they're not going to rug you. I'm like, no. Can you be self-sovereign? Like, I can hold my Bitcoin in a multi-sig. I control the UTXOs. I am self-sovereign. And yes, I haven't read the code, and I don't know if the multi-sig can rug me, and I don't know if I can get rugged by colluded hardware wallets, and like all that. I get all that, but just in terms of self-sovereign at a UTXO level, I am. We've been out to Malawi, we've been out to Ghana, we've been out to Kenya, we've been out to Lebanon, we've been out to Argentina, I've been to Venezuela, I've been to Colombia. Most of the places I'm going to, there aren't going to be people with thousands and thousands or tens of thousands of dollars in a UTXO. They might have $1,000 or $100 or $50. If they are going straight to Lightning, can they ever be self-sovereign? And my view is, I don't think they can. And whilst they have things like Bitcoin banks and we have Liquid and we have Fedi, these are all things where there is an attack vector where you can be rugged. I think I'm pretty sure of this, but no one seems to want to say this.
Yeah. I mean, like I would caveat that a little bit, but the core of your point is entirely correct. Without controlling that UTXO yourself, like collaborating with other people, there is a shift in how that trust model works. Now, if we continue improving Bitcoin, the protocol, if we get past this phase of stupidity and just fear and dogma and continue adding new features to it in order to make it scale, sharing a UTXO still will not be the exact same thing as having one yourself, but there is a path to get it to a point where it's close enough that the difference that still remains, I don't think is worth arguing about if we get there.
What's the right order to do this? Shall we cover the technical side of things, or the cultural blocks?
I mean, I'd like to kind of stick with the cultural stuff, honestly, for a bit.
Okay, so you walked into the room earlier and you're like, Bitcoin is fucked. And I know you're joking, but I also know there's something behind that, right? What is your TLDR, lay of the land, where we're at with Bitcoin right now? It feels like it's like you have periods of peace and periods of warfare. We had the block size wars, we had a period of warfare, and then we went through some relative peace. It feels like we're entering another period of warfare.
Well, it's a really kind of complicated thing. And what it boils down to is just the narratives that people who have been here for a while pushed. And the ones that newer people in the last couple of years who entered this space and really started diving deep, trying to understand how all this works, wrap their head around things. A lot of people, rather than try to actually get to a point of understanding, they just adopt a narrative. And then they just use that narrative as kind of a comfort blanket that, okay, I understand something now because I can just repeat this narrative.
Yep.
And so much of the public discourse in this space at this point is pretty much just narrative wars. There is no actual understanding underneath it. There is no actual rational argument or insight or fact of reality. It's just people with conflicting narratives that they don't even understand the real logical foundation of, just being flung at each other. And so we're kind of at this impasse where it's almost impossible to really push a change or doing something we need to do in order to make actual sovereign control of Bitcoin more safely scalable, because nobody actually wants to sit down and accept that there is a lot of stuff I don't understand, or there's a lot of stuff that I was wrong about. So let's come to the table and actually learn to try to progress a conversation or a discourse based on logic, instead of just, I'm on this narrative team and you're on that narrative team, so you are the enemy.
Okay, so the impasse is about scaling.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are the narratives which are kind of bumping up against each other?
Like on one side, the camp that thinks Bitcoin is literally perfect, that it'll just magically scale somehow that works if we just stop changing anything right now. This is good enough. The finite cap of 21 million is all that matters. And people's ability to actually self-custody their coins, who cares? Just magic will figure something out. Well, we can't without actually changing Bitcoin.
That would be like the people that believe they've got self-sovereignty, but believe everyone else will just have a federated custody model or whatever it is.
Bitcoin banks. Mm-hmm. But that is what it was Hal or Satoshi. So Hal said he thinks we'll have Bitcoin banks because of scaling issues.
I mean, a lot of people did. James A. Donald was the first person to reply to Satoshi when he published the white paper. And his first comment was, well, this doesn't work, but if we put Xiaomi and eCash mints on top of it, it can work. But this.
But you don't think that's enough?
I don't. I mean, if that's what it comes down to, because of the stubbornness and the refusal to move just stagnates everything, then it's what it is, and we have to deal with what it is. But that to me is not good enough. And that's
because sorry to interrupt. I want to follow the narrative or help some of the listeners along. That's because while we get 21 million and censorship resistance, that's primarily we've created almost an elite layer who have access to that. And the peasants essentially have to go with a secondary option, which is some kind of custody threat model.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so some people are okay with that. You're like, that's not good enough. We can do better.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other side, let's say the middle first, with people like me, who I think we can do better. I think we can do more to extend that sovereignty, that scalability to more people. But I still think that we should be very cautious in how we go about doing that. We should not be trying to immediately get to the perfect thing we can do. We should look at the safe minimal change that we can incrementally move up to that will give us a lot more scalability for people. And we should do that, build that out until that starts hitting like the limits of how far it can scale. And then look at the next safe, like simple incremental thing we can do. And I feel like most of the people who think that we should continue to change Bitcoin fall into that camp. Like, yes, we need to change things, but we should be very cautious, very like methodical and thorough and safe. And then on the other far extreme, you have people that are literally just like, let's turn on everything. Like, who cares about being safe? Who cares about being cautious? Everybody should just be able to build anything they want. So let's turn on everything that anybody who wants to build something needs, and we'll just see what happens.
And extremes are never good. Usually the answer's in the gray area. Do you think there's potentially this might not be the best analogy, but go with me. The people who start wars, I do wonder if they would start wars if they knew there was a high chance their family would be killed, send their own children to war. And I do wonder if are the people that are against or very conservative about approaching scaling sovereignty okay with that because they are already in the elite UTXO ownership camp, kind of like self-sovereignty for me, but not for thee. Do you see what I'm saying?
I think a lot of the people who don't want to change anything at all definitely fall into that category. I would say the people like myself who want like safe incremental changes, I want to get to a world where Bitcoin scales to everybody and they actually do have sovereign control and there is no obscured group or person they have to trust hidden away where they're not really self-sovereign. But I don't want to just rush so desperately to get to that place that we wind up breaking everything in the process.
Okay. So what do you think are the next steps? What is the solution? Yeah, when you say incremental steps, I guess you know what you think the next incremental step should be.
Well, to me, the next step is a basic covenant. Okay. And the most basic proposal that's thoroughly tested, thoroughly worked through is Jeremy Rubin's check template verify. And there is a lot of resistance to that from kind of two sides of the extremes.
Should we explain what that all is?
Yeah.
So, okay, explain firstly, what are covenants?
So in the most abstract, like high level view, a covenant is just like a script or an opcode that you can send Bitcoin and lock it up to. And that script, instead of just saying how you have to prove you're allowed to spend this one coin, it also tells you it has to be spent in this specific way. So like if I wanted to say pay like 100 people, but fees are very high and you all don't want to have like half of the money I'm paying you disappear because fees are high. Well, with check template verify, what I can do is I can predefine the transaction that would like link into a few other transactions and eventually peel out and pay all 100 people their money. Now, all I have to do is get that first transaction using CTV confirmed in the blockchain. And it might be a month, it might be 6 months until fees come down low enough that everybody can spend the rest of the transactions and claim their money. But every one of them can be 100% sure that they will get their money because there is, by consensus, no other way that that coin that's actually confirmed in a block can be spent now. Like the only way that the Bitcoin network and protocol will let it be spent is the exact transactions that unfurl and then pay all these 100 people.
So all covenants do is they put restrictions on how you can spend the UTXO.
Yeah.
So they're basically making UTXOs themselves more dynamic.
I mean, the way I would kind of frame CTV, like this one type of covenant, is think about it like pre-signed transactions. You can pre-sign a bunch of transactions off-chain and then everybody can just hold on to them and use them later. But with a pre-signed transaction, I can just sign a different one and double spend all that money. And now all of the transactions everyone else has, they're not spendable because the coin that was put into them is gone now. It's double spent. CTV is essentially just pre-signed transactions, except there is no way to double spend them once you create the first CTV UTXO because there's no keys signing it. It's the actual script itself going, this is where these coins have to be spent in the future, and these are the only places they can be spent to.
Okay. How does this take us into the area of like shared UTXO ownership? Yes. How does that actually work? Are we essentially splitting a UTXO into essentially shares of a UTXO?
Yeah. Like the simplest way to think about it is imagine that one original CTV UTXO and you have transactions that spend from that and it breaks it into two and those break into two, so on and so forth, until at the end of it, all the UTXOs at the end of this tree of transactions that are committed to are just lightning channels for like 100 people. All 100 lightning channels can be treated as confirmed and open when that first UTXO starting this CTV tree is actually confirmed on chain.
Okay, I'm trying to picture this in my head. So you create it, that opens up a bunch of lightning channels, essentially a bunch of pipes to distribute it to the different people. Once they've received it, that can go back on chain for them.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work? So, again, excuse my ignorance, but you know me. I think in terms of UTXOs, right? That I have in my wallet a bunch of UTXOs, and when I go to send some Bitcoin, say to Danny, my wallet's going to go, right, we'll either send this one and I'll have change, or it'll merge 3 UTXOs and then I'll get some change. Whatever, it just builds up the transaction to send to Danny. What does my wallet see if I've got a shared UTXO?
It would see that UTXO that exists, and then your wallet would keep all of the transactions that are locked in and like you can't back out of them that eventually spend to the UTXO that doesn't exist yet that you are in control of. And it would just know following from the one that actually exists on chain to what you can call it is a virtual UTXO. This is what Barack, the creator of ARK, has kind of been calling the coins that people own in an ARK at the edge of it. And actually Jeremy Rubin originally came up with the term when he was designing things for CTV. But you can think of a virtual UTXO as one that doesn't actually exist on chain because it hasn't been confirmed yet, but it's committed to eventually existing in an irrevocable way because of the CTV covenant template.
So if I was creating a transaction and I was sending to Danny, would it be able to assemble my transaction out of a bunch of UTXOs I have, but maybe this part of a UTXO? Or does that one have to confirm first?
If you wanted to spend it to Danny on chain, then it would have to actually unfurl and get confirmed on chain first. Okay. But that could be a lightning channel, and Danny could have his own lightning channel with a virtual UTXO the same way, and you guys could just make this payment off chain over lightning and not have to actually get the VUTXO created on chain.
Okay, so most importantly, will all the wallets abstract this away and just do it all for us that I wouldn't even have to be aware of?
Yeah.
I tried to pull up a diagram to make this simple, but I don't think it helps.
Oh, that's it. That looks like an Ethereum roadmap.
Your confusion is absolved, everyone.
Yeah.
I don't think we should even try and go through this.
It does look like an Ethereum roadmap.
I mean, just think of it as like the basic tree. Like you have the root at the top, and this is the actual UTXO that exists on chain. And then it splits out and makes 4 more virtual UTXOs that aren't on chain. And then those split and make 4 more virtual UTXOs until you get to the bottom of the tree. And then those are the virtual UTXOs that all of the people sharing the real one on chain like have as like their claim for like their parts of the real UTXO.
And so that works in the scenario where you want to pay 100 people at once. just say I just want to send Danny $200 on chain, even $1,000, but we're in an environment where on chain fees are 200, right? Can I be merged into another UTXO with that?
Well,
or is it only work in the instance where I want to pay a bunch of people at the same time?
here's like I think the most powerful like way that these things can be used. If you just like picture the tree again.
Yeah.
All right. All of the VUTXOs on the bottom just pay out to each user's like single key. If you use Schnorr and Taproot, making a multi-sig address is literally just as simple as just taking two individual keys and adding them together. And that's it. So what you can do here is instead of only having like CTV irrevocably commit to all of these things confirming on chain, we can go to the bottom and like it's groups of 4. So we'll take these 4 people's keys and smush them together into a multi-sig address. And we'll have that multi-sig address where 100% of those 4 people have to sign and they can do whatever they want. And underneath that in Taproot, you have the CTV commitment. So you do this through the whole tree. Every group of 4 gets added into a multi-sig, and then you go up a level. And all of those get added into a multi-sig, and you go up a level until like this actual UTXO on chain is all 100 people. And all 100 people have to sign the multi-sig key to kind of make a transaction cutting through the tree. And so now, instead of having to eventually unfurl this whole chain of transactions and confirm them all on chain, wherever you can get to a point in that tree where everybody will cooperate and sign a new transaction, like distributing the funds properly, you can kind of just cut out all of the tree below it, and everybody can just move the money wherever they want to much more efficiently.
All right, let me tell you what I care about and I don't care about. So with the internet, I put in a web address and a website comes up. I don't care about how packets of data move. I've got no interest. With this, really, I kind of don't care about how it's done. What I want to know is I open my wallet, I choose to send Danny money, and it gets to him, Bitcoin, and it gets to him. And hopefully, whether it's a CTV, a UTXO on its own, the Lightning, I don't really care. I want to get to him as quickly and cheaply as possible and want everything abstracted away. Will that happen? And essentially, are we discussing something that most Bitcoin users will never know is happening?
Yeah. Like the simplest way that this type of thing can work is like an LSP, like Phoenix or Breeze. They would just make like a giant tree like this on a single UTXO where everybody has a Lightning channel with Breeze or Phoenix at the end. And they can just do that. And then everybody has a fraction of the fee to actually open the channel. And whenever it comes time to close, like Breeze or Phoenix can kind of coordinate like the whole process of we're going to close some stuff out, but do it much more efficiently. And this would just be part of like the service that they're providing as like your Lightning service provider.
So this works really well with Lightning in that I will have a Lightning address, which means, and if it's an address I control, I therefore control the UTXO associated with that channel. That somebody does that send at their end, and then it ends up going through that Lightning channel into my Lightning channel, which is part of that UTXO. Mm-hmm. And at some point, if I want to close that UTXO, that's up to me. If I've got $100 in there, it doesn't make sense. But if over time I build up $10,000, I might actually just close that channel down or close down that that channel, and I just have that UTXO holding $10,000. Is that kind of what's happening?
Yeah.
This works well with Lightning.
Yes.
Without Lightning, if you're not on the Lightning net, well, no, actually, because your wallet can do all the Lightning stuff for you, so you don't have to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm whatever. Like, if you're telling me this is... it kind of makes sense, but if you're telling me this is the path, as long as it's abstracted away, the most important thing is this is abstracted away. People don't want to know about this. I don't even think people want to open channels and say, I've opened a channel to you. I think that all just needs to be abstracted away.
Mm-hmm.
So why are people against it?
Well, if we look at the left curvers, it's because they pretty much don't understand anything about how Bitcoin works technically. And there have just been like some really ridiculous arguments and narratives propagated in the last few years. Like CTV will allow the government to make your coins unspendable except where the government says it's acceptable to spend them. And that's just not how this works.
What's the basis of that argument?
There is no basis. It's literally just this argument was made. And in theory, there are much more advanced covenants that you could build that would do something like this. But CTV is not that. And there are two kind of inherent aspects of this. One, what CTV does is just essentially pre-signed transactions. It's just there's no way to back out of them. There's no way for the one guy who made it, the set of transactions, to double spend them.
Okay.
So you cannot just arbitrarily restrict your money only going to certain places, but still let you spend it however you want in the acceptable places. Because, like, think about this. Let's say there's 100 different merchants that the government says it's okay for you to shop at. Think about how many pre-signed transactions they would have to make for like every possible purchase that you could make at every single one of these stores in every single order. Like from like I'm buying a 2-cent stick of gum to a $20 case of beer. And like you have to figure out all the it's just.
But how does I don't understand how the government inserts themselves into that.
Well, this is the next part. Like when you go send me Bitcoin, you and your wallet generate the address to send the Bitcoin to. Like if the government was going to do something like this, your wallet generates your address and you show it to somebody, and then they take that address or the script underneath it, and then they add stuff to it. So your wallet's just going to go, money didn't show up because you didn't send money to the address I gave you, so you didn't pay me.
So does the receiver set the rules of where that can be spent?
Mm-hmm.
So there's no way that the government can insert themselves in the middle of that, is what you're saying?
Exactly.
Yeah, I get you.
Okay, so that is one version of covenants, which is Jeremy Rubin's. There's multiple ways to skin a
cat.
What kind of cat? Multiple ways to skin an op cat. It's not a
Cat is actually not a covenant.
No, I know. So we're just making a joke. But there's multiple ways to skin a cat. So is there a select few ways you can do it? Infinite ways you can do it? I mean, I'm not a developer.
Well, let's just stick with CTV for a minute. Like it commits to the entire transaction that would be spending the CTV coin after you make it. All the outputs, like the scripts for those outputs and where the money is going, like how much money is going there, like the entire transaction essentially. You could do something a little more granular. Like, let's say I want to guarantee that out of the 10 Bitcoin that I lock in here, 1 Bitcoin, when this gets spent, has to go to Danny. Like, if you could just have a thing like CTV, but instead of committing to the whole transaction, it just commits to that output. And then the other 9 Bitcoin you can spend wherever you want. And that can just be decided like whenever you go to spend the coin, instead of like you have to decide before you even create this output. Like that's kind of another direction that the type of covenant CTV could be done. So like the same general idea, but instead of committing to the entire transaction that's going to spend this coin, you just commit to certain parts of it. And then the rest you can like do whatever you want with when you go to spend it.
Okay, so Jeremy put the proposal forward, created a BIP. Because I mean, like I'm aware it didn't get through. I'm aware Jeremy became disillusioned with it all. What is the most non-emotional version of events, or a way of explaining those events?
Well, Jeremy was working on CTV, I think around like conceptually before Taproot, but like actually trying to implement it while Taproot was being developed. And he originally was trying to kind of push it with Taproot so that like under the Taproot tree, like how you can have different spending conditions, he wanted CTV to just be at the start, like a special opcode inside Taproot. And this would just be like part of the bundled upgrade. Core developers didn't want to do that just because Taproot was such a massive, like complicated change to things. They wanted to keep it simple, like just do like Taproot itself and not try to add all these other things on top of it, which is, it's not, you know, an unreasonable argument to make. So, you know, Taproot, speedy trial, all that drama happened and it activated. And so Jeremy...
What's speedy trial? Explain.
Let's just see if miners will activate this fork in 3 months. And if they don't, then it just won't activate.
So you actually pushing it, it's actually being pushed then?
No, this was how we activated Taproot. And it was because nobody could agree on which activation mechanism to use. Everybody was just like, we'll do the little trial period. We'll give miners 3 months. And if miners signal within that period, it'll turn on and activate. And if they don't, then it just won't activate. And we'll figure out what to do after that.
So CTV was pushed for activation.
Jeremy discussed it, but this is something that has been wildly misrepresented in like the years afterwards. Like I myself did not like speedy trial. I think any type of activation mechanism that gives miners the ability to just withhold like their signal for activation and actually stop it from activating is a horrible idea. Like if there is consensus amongst the rest of the network that we want to turn something on, miners should not have an option. It's simply, here is the deadline. If you don't turn it on earlier before that deadline, it's turning on anyway.
And that can be done?
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's been done with upgrades before?
That's pretty much what the UASF in 2017 was. It's just instead of core using that activation mechanism, everybody wrote a new client that worked that way, and we're just like we're turning this on like one way or another. So
where does consensus exist with this? Because if it's speedy trial, consensus exists with the miners. If the miners, what's the percentage approval you need?
I believe it was 90 or 95.
Yeah, it's high.
For that.
So if the miners, if it's pushed to speedy trial and 90, 95 agree, then it exists. And the other few percent, if they don't upgrade, their blocks become invalid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Or no, I mean, no, that not invalid if they mined a block after it turned on that didn't respect the Taproot rules. That would be like orphaned and invalid.
Okay. So that 5% are incentivized to join the other 95% or that 10%. Great. The other version, where does the consensus exist? Is that a developer consensus that it's the developers agree like with UTXO?
I would say that it starts with the developers in a speedy trial activation, but the assumption is developers are not going to release a speedy trial client unless they think that there is wider like user base business consensus around something. But like the key thing though, I kind of want to touch on with Jeremy proposing turning on CTV is it has been portrayed from like the instant he proposed this, that he was just trying to push CTV to turn on with speedy trial, like immediately after Taproot. That is not what he did. What he did was release a client with a speedy trial activation mechanism for CTV, but he also wrote code for people who didn't want it to turn on to run, where if people started signaling to activate CTV, the people running the client who didn't want it activated would fork themselves off, and they would essentially do the opposite of the UASF. Like, we are going to change our clients so that it is impossible for this feature to activate. And so what Jeremy actually did was kind of go, here's a client for people who want this thing to activate, and here's a client for people who don't want it to activate. And I've given you guys the tools for both options. Like, you guys all figure it out. And it's been portrayed as Jeremy trying to like force CTV through using speedy trial. That is
rushed is the word I've heard a bunch of times.
Yeah, but that is just factually not what happened.
Is this like politics in that if you want to be, if you want to say win the Republican nomination, you have to spend a lot of time traveling around the country, going to different states, going to different communities, and talking to people and telling them about who you are and why they should care. And you can do, Vivek Ramaswamy can do as much work as Donald Trump. He can go everywhere, but Vivek Ramaswamy doesn't already have the popular political support because he's new compared to Donald Trump. So even if he's making good ground, there's a lot of people who will stick with Donald Trump because they kind of know who he is. So when it comes to a vote, Vivek just doesn't make the ground. Is it a case that Jeremy doesn't have, he's not like that OG core developer, has that popular, I know he does have a strong background, but bear with me. He's not like the Peter Willey, the Luke Dasher, the Adam Back. And so he maybe didn't do enough work gaining political support.
Let me put it this way. Alex B made a tweet yesterday that is completely reality. If Jeremy worked for Blockstream, CTV would have been active like 2 years ago.
So it is a game of politics.
Yeah. Okay.
And politics is often about trust and better the devil you know and influence. And so is that maybe a reality in there that Jeremy, he didn't work for Blockstream and he maybe needed to gain more political support, spend more time going to visit people, spending time with people who do have that influence to say, this is what I'm thinking, get their feedback. Is it just a political process? And that sadly, even in a decentralized system as we are, because we require social consensus, we require people to gain enough political support for something.
I mean, to a degree, yes, but the reality of how things played out is he did all of those things. He spent a massive amount of time like writing up, explaining like a dozen things that you could build with CTV. He built proof of concepts of all kinds of things. He even built a programming environment. It's kind of similar to Miniscript called Sapio to make it easier for other people to do proof of concepts showing what you could do with CTV. Like he threw hackathons and workshops for years. Like I think 2021, 2022, 2023, or maybe not 2023. He was doing like these plebfi events, like hackathon events, like what can you build with CTV? And he was doing those at other conferences and like places across the US too. And he was doing all of this, but you had people from Blockstream and a lot of core developers at the same time throwing shade at Jeremy and kind of inventing nonsense conspiracies and insinuations that Jeremy had some ulterior motive or wasn't trustworthy or just wasn't following the process. So the entire time Jeremy was putting in the work to actually do all of those things you said, Peter, like there were other people just like throwing bullshit at him and undermining his attempts to honestly and openly like go through that process with people.
So you gave us the left curve argument. What if you had to like take the other side? What would the good argument against covenants be?
Well, I don't think there is one, but I'll tell you the argument that a lot of developers are making, that CTV doesn't do enough, that it's not flexible enough, that it's not advanced enough. And there is actually a proposal, TX hash, from, I want to say Russ O'Connor from Blockstream. Don't hold me to that though. Things are it's getting to be a lot of stuff to keep track of these days, but it's essentially just CTV, but we made it instead of Jeremy. And like, I was talking earlier about like committing to the entire transaction versus just parts of it. CTV was specifically designed so that it could be upgraded in the future to go from committing to the entire transaction to we're just going to pick different pieces to commit to. Transaction hash is literally that exact same thing. Like it has the default mode of like it commits to the whole thing, but we're going to have upgrade paths to where you can pick specific parts of a transaction to commit to. And it literally is just CTV, but Blockstream made it and not Jeremy. And that's kind of, in my opinion, like how absolutely ridiculous things are getting. Like we're going to do the exact same thing that Jeremy did, but it wasn't by Jeremy, so it's good this time.
So I imagine if I had them here, they would put up different arguments. And one argument I've heard, because we do our research, is that there's a non-zero risk that coins can get stuck.
That's completely irrelevant. That can happen with TX hash too. That can just happen with you losing your keys. Like
but there's a different point. Like you've spent. So my understanding is that you spent these keys. You spent these coins honestly, and there are certain scenarios with CTV that coins can get stuck. Now you got to remember, you're the one who has to explain the reality of that argument. I'm not going to give you a technical reason.
If the only way that can happen is if you lose the equivalent of the pre-signed transactions that you need to spend it. That is the exact same way that Lightning works. If you have a Lightning channel open and you lose your phone, or the hard drive gets screwed up and all those transactions get lost, you just lost your money. Unless the person you have that channel with is a super nice guy and you have some way to go up to him and be like, hey, I screwed up. Can you give me the money that I'm supposed to get? And there's no way for you to enforce that. You just have to trust him to do it. It's the exact same thing.
Because there's no abort facility.
Yeah. Like the minute you start like lifting coins off chain and relying on pre-signed transactions or off-chain data, that risk exists. It does not matter at all what specific protocol or thing you're using to do that. Like everything off chain has that risk.
What about the original incompatibility with Taproot?
It was compatible with Taproot. Like the original implementation Jeremy made supports doing it inside TapScript in a tap tree. And then also just doing it as its own bare script where it's only CTV and there's no other like way to spend the coins.
So when I was told it was originally incompatible with Taproot, that was incorrect.
Yes. Okay. Like unless you can give me like a more specific argument about that, like that's from my understanding just completely not true.
And so you don't have a valid criticism that you think the other side has with this. There's not one you think, do you know what? They've got a point here. Because it's very rare that somebody, I can imagine, it's very rare that someone like Jeremy, not criticize him directly, would go through a perfect path.
No, I mean, if you want to like set aside CTV versus transaction hash and look at CTV and transaction hash versus other like very different types of covenants, there are definitely arguments that you can make there that like, let's do something more flexible that we can do more stuff with. But just looking at CTV and transaction hash, like compared to each other, every argument to not do CTV and do transaction hash instead is just completely ridiculous.
Because we're obviously going to have to reach out to people at Blockstream and say, you need to tell your side of the story on this. Yeah. And so I would think it's good for someone like you to play out their arguments as you maybe see it.
I mean, like this is kind of like what I got into during the BitDevs last night with that covenants.info website. Okay. It is full of factual inaccuracies.
Who runs that website?
Stephen Roos from Blockstream.
Interesting. I was sent a podcast he did with, I think, with Stefan.
That podcast also, there are numerous things he said in that podcast that are just factually not true.
Okay. Does this upgrade produce any additional risk to developers? We've been in a period of couple of years now where developers have started to have to face onerous lawsuits and onerous threats. Is there anything here where we increase the threat surface to developers with this kind of change?
No, this is a incredibly simple change. It's only like 100 something lines of code. It's literally just take the transaction spending the CTV output, you hash it, and you check against the hash that the CTV lock has that matches the transaction that's supposed to spend it. It's literally just check a hash.
Tell me if you disagree, Danny. So, as non-technical person, I say people, but you should answer yourself. As a non-technical,
people.
yeah, it's technical people. I can never get into the debate, the technical side of things. It's just never going to happen. But I have an interest in Bitcoin, and if it's a new civil war that potentially comes, I have an interest because I kind of joined Bitcoin during the last one, and it's always a potential threat to my worldview, my savings technology, my wealth generation. So I take an interest. My observation is this is a political problem.
Yeah,
there's a political problem, and I wonder whether the two sides of the argument are talking around each other, across each other, and is there a way to facilitate getting these people in the room to actually kind of hash this out?
Honestly, just random tangents. I think like kind of taking that conversation into a deeper direction, Reardon Code or Brandon Black might be somebody you guys are interested in trying to get on the show.
Who's that?
He's not a core developer before his recent pull request for the L-enhanced thing, CTV, check sig from stack, and internal key. He wrote those. But he has been a developer working in the space for years and has been deeply following the development process a lot closer and more consistently than I have. He used to work at BitGo. But he is definitely, I think, somebody who just frankly has a little more familiarity with the development process than I do, and also will probably be more charitable than I am going to be. Like as far as looking at the other people's side of that, like the other people's arguments against things. And he also is a supporter of CTV. So it's
Okay,
he's gonna be a lot deeper and closer to like the core subject matter, and also just a lot more willing to extend charity than I am to the other side of an argument.
But we're also going to probably want to talk to Polstra, Adam Back, Gregory Maxwell if we could. The old guard. We're also going to want to talk to them. But it does feel like an old guard versus new guard thing. Is that a fair observation or not?
Yeah, I would, and not just that black and white, but I would say that is a huge dynamic of this, because a lot of the old guards, so to say, have kind of stepped away, like for a combination of things, like the lawsuits from Craig and just not wanting to be involved to that type of risk, just getting burnt out on things.
But that was the point. That was the point I raised. People have been at risk for them.
Well, I mean, like Peter Wulla specifically, like he stepped down from his role and will not touch consensus code anymore, specifically because of how blindly people just trust Peter. And he was not like, I actually respect the shit out of Peter for doing that. Like he looking at that dynamic and how blindly people would just accept whatever he said is like the best thing to do. He stepped away and went, no, I do not want to have that degree of personal influence on the development process.
Kind of similar to how why Satoshi stepped away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because I do worry about litigation risk for people working on Bitcoin. We've seen the threats, live lawsuits that they're rough to go through. And I don't believe the community has stepped up enough to show support for people.
If it wasn't for Jack Dorsey bankrolling, like dealing with these lawsuits, I I don't even imagine, like I cannot imagine how bad this would get on a personal financial level for the developers involved.
Well,
in
I
that.
can tell you personally, because I have been through that, and Jack Dorsey, his fund was for developers. It wasn't for influencers. No, which is fine. You know, I'm glad he supports them. I've had some support. Tether supported me. A couple of other people privately support, but I'm about £1 million down. I don't have that kind of loose change in the bank, right? And it fucks you. You can't sleep. Danny saw me at my worst. I've been to hospital twice after massive panic attacks because I've had meetings with my lawyers and departments within their law firm that explains how bankruptcy works. Because if I lose, I'm going to be bankrupt. I've seen what Cobra went through. Yeah, the community is we have a wealthy community with lots of billionaires, and we've had some people who aren't even millionaires who have been attacked, and that's a chilling effect. Like there are people within this community who could step forward and pay for every lawsuit, and it'd be like me giving away £1,000, and we haven't done enough in that area, nowhere near.
Yeah,
and so I can fully respect some people who are fearful of big upgrades to Bitcoin and then being considered someone that can be sued.
yeah, but then that's kind of a quandary then.
Yeah.
Like, do we find some way to push forward and solve problems that we need to solve? Or do we just throw up our hands and go, well, I guess sovereign use of Bitcoin is something only 1% of the 1% will ever be able to afford?
Well, from our side, obviously, I agree with you because it's a question we're asking. And so these conversations are useful. We just have to get other people in the room and have those conversations. And I don't know if we can help, but at least we can try and help people understand. Should we talk to Jeremy?
Jeremy Rubin? If he'll come on, absolutely. He is, honestly, I've kind of taken to calling him Greg Max Jr. or G Max Jr. lately because honestly, I struggle to think of a developer I have personally interacted with or talked to that approaches Greg's level of just sheer
Genius.
Brilliance, like Jeremy. Like,
have you talked to Greg Maxwell about this?
I never really talked to Greg that much at all. Like way back in like 2013, 2014, I'd have like some odd interactions with him on IRC once and again. But I never really talked with him that deeply or consistently. He's just always been like, oh, Greg posted something somewhere. I have to go read this because there is 100% going to be very valuable insights in this.
Yeah. Okay. Can we talk about Opcat?
I knew this was going to fucking happen.
Of course you did, because we discussed it last night and it scared the bejesus out of me. Scared the cat shit out of me. Right. Explain what Opcat is.
So
as simply as possible.
This is why I am terrified that there is actually a chance that this happens. Strictly speaking, all Opcat does is when you are executing a Bitcoin script, like you have individual things like a hash or a piece of data that you hash to check against a hash, or like the public key, and then you take the signature and verify it against that. What Opcat lets you do is take two separate pieces of like data being fed into the script interpreter to verify and just smash them together into one thing. And that might just sound like, what's the big deal? But in the context of a programming language that is supposed to be very limited, very restricted in what it can do, that opens up all kinds of doors. Because now like a piece of data or like something that you want to verify step by step that was not possible before, all of a sudden becomes possible because you're no longer limited by like, here are the individual pieces of data being verified. You can like glue things together, like just construct rather than have it fed in already what you are validating.
So in layman's terms, it allows you to do everything, all the fuckery from Ethereum on Bitcoin.
Not immediately by itself. Although it does by itself open a lot of doors. But the real horrifying thing is if we start adding other features after opcat, because each new thing you add, you have to think about now, what does this enable when you have opcat and you can glue separate pieces of data together dynamically. And each new thing you add after opcat just starts making it even crazier.
What's
and
the good side of opcat? Why do people want it? What's the cool thing about it?
Developers want it because now they can just go full autist and build all kinds of crazy stuff that you can't do right now, which is exactly why I don't want it, because I'm sorry, but autists should not be the ones deciding what toys they get to play with in a complex distributed system like Bitcoin, because everything has like knock-on consequences.
We went for a beer last night. What did I tell you?
Exactly the same thing. You should tell the story about your...
Yeah, look, I wasn't working on complex distributed systems, but I had a web development company, and I was the CEO, and we had 40 people, of which 10 were PHP developers. And they're brilliant. These people, the shit they can build and the time they can build is insane. But there's 3 ways to approach it. You could give them a piece of paper and say, build this, wait a week and see what they've built, and it would not be what you asked for, and they would have added other cool stuff that they think's cool, which wasn't useful and didn't make sense, and the UX would be terrible, but they would love it because it was cool. Or there would be, you give a very prescriptive UX, a very prescriptive design, you would put them in front of them and say, just build that and only that, and every review, when they deviated, you say no, because there is a difference between it being able to build stuff and then knowing what to build for an end user. And so we'd involve the developers within the process, in the schematics, but we would have a tech director who was the bridge between those, who kind of understood UX and business cases. And that was the way to do it, because these brilliant people want to just build really cool stuff. They don't want to be prescribed what to build. They don't want to say, you click that button, it does that, and that's all it can do. They want to come up with new cool stuff because it's fun. And so that's just in the field of web development. In Bitcoin, I want to be able to send money, receive money, and store money and never fail. I'm shit scared of people being able to create some fuckery which risks that.
Yep. I mean, just to kind of put it bluntly, aside from the work on Lightning, the C Lightning team, Rusty, Lisa, and them have built, what has Blockstream ever built that actually got users using it? It's almost nothing. Everything of value that company and the people there have done is research, or Peter and Andrew working on things like SegWit and Taproot. Show me the product that Blockstream has made that has actually gotten huge user adoption. It doesn't exist. And I'm sorry, everybody at that company are brilliant people who have done incredibly valuable things for Bitcoin. They suck at product design. And it's just okay, I'm sorry, that right there is the reinforcement of, I don't think that Bitcoin should be catering to the wizard autistic shit that you want to build, as far as how Bitcoin should change. All that matters are the users, the services, the actual businesses really using Bitcoin and meeting their needs. This should not be a science experiment where I want my fun toy to play with.
There is a caveat to that. During the block size wars, the businesses wanted bigger blocks. So you can't always go down that route. But I'm empathizing exactly what you're saying. But you have to start with the business case. Always the business case. So if you start with the business case, the businesses might want this. They might want bigger blocks, and we'll know, no, that's not the trade-off we want because it destroys the system. So there has to be some nuance to that. But you have to start with the business case, the user case, the end case.
Mm-hmm.
Harry Suddock last night was explaining the business case for Covenants, what he can do with it for his business. That is a business case. Cool, great. So then you have to go, well, does this fuck up decentralization? Does this fuck up censorship resistance? Are there other risks? So there's like a path you can go down, and I'm not the guy to do it, but there has to be some caveats.
Yeah, I mean, but it's still like at the end of the day, like this is the whole balancing act. Like who's involved? The users, the developers, the businesses. Ultimately, though, what really matters is the users and like meeting their needs. And quite frankly, like the types of problems users are having right now are very simple problems. But fees are getting too high. So we need a way to scalably compact people into UTXOs more densely. That's it. Like we do not need all the fancy, crazy stuff right now. We need companies like Phoenix and Breeze to be able to build very simple like trees with something like CTV so that the per user cost of onboarding into the Lightning Network is reasonably affordable for them now. We don't need to go full autist magic. We just need to address the simple problem.
So here, it just looks to me as a casual observer, a structural issue that comes with a distributed system with decentralization in that, if this was built within a company structure, you would have business case, you would have a project manager, you would have a planner, you would have a UX designer. There's a lot of people that go into a system design. It seems to be that Bitcoin development is developer-led without those traditional structures of a business manager with a business case and a planner and a UX. Fine. But that to me just looks like that's where the obstruction is, and then you don't have the politicians who are able to bring the parties together when they disagree. That may look like I've simplified something, but that just feels like what it is to me.
That is literally exactly what it is. Like me and Rob Hamilton have been like talking with Luke a little bit during the whole CTV push lately, and just arguments over filters. And like Luke himself says, like, developers aren't really talking to each other anymore outside of GitHub. Like people are just like withdrawing into their local clique of developers, and the actual communication and discourse across those little cliques, it's like dying off to nothing. And so it's turning into like, rather than everybody openly collaborating and trying to figure out like what do users need, like what is the simple safe thing, it's turning into like a power struggle of sorts,
which never benefits anyone, especially if you don't have the social skills to get to the table and actually have a productive conversation, understand the give or take. Can you hear somebody else's argument, and can you walk through their argument and understand what it is? If you don't have the social skills of that, you need to outsource that to somebody else who can do that for you. And I don't know how Bitcoin solves that. I don't know who the politicians in Bitcoin who can facilitate that are. There will be people capable.
I mean, it's just a tough problem. Like from my perspective, what it really is starting to turn into is when discussing consensus changes, every developer who has like some pet project or like idea for like, this is how we make second layers work, or like this is how we fix like Lightning, like they're ignoring everything else except like their pet like consensus change that is the best thing for the one thing that they want to build, rather than thinking like what like offers the most value for everything everyone is building. And like we're just in this corner here now where everyone is just like gaslighting and arguing and making like subtly misleading like statements or claims in public, trying to cheerlead. Yeah, of course I'm perfect. but like trying to like push people towards supporting their thing because it's the best tailored for the one project they want to build, rather than trying to find like the lowest common denominator that offers something of value safely without risk for the things that everybody is building.
So going back to Opcat, is there a serious movement to have this push live? Or
I mean, Udi and the Wizards are literally doing that. Like,
why do they need it? Why do they want it?
Honestly, I don't know, but my assumption is that OpCat would be incredibly helpful in making Robin Linus's BitVM a lot more efficient. And what Robin really wants to do with BitVM is enable a two-way peg so that you can do something like drive chains without a soft fork. And what's up?
You sitting back there? Hey.
Justin? Hey.
I was
Just grab a seat.
Couldn't take a seat.
Hey, Rob.
Danny just messaged me to come down here. So
Guess what we're doing?
we're concatenating the bites. Yeah, love it.
Bring the mic up.
Yeah, you got it.
So Danny no longer has a mic, so you're gonna have to yell. And you're now in charge of making sure the cameras don't go down, the audio levels are correct.
I quit.
Yeah.
Danny really does all the work on this show. My goodness,
Yeah, I mean, I'm just here for this.
it's not a lot
And
you're
this.
bringing. Yeah, right.
Hey, you see my inbox. Fuck, Danny, you take this. I have to take this.
No, go on.
No, I have to literally take this.
All right, we'll pause then.
All right.
Chaos.
I guess we are in charge of what Bitcoin did.
We concatenated the hosts, and now we broke everything.
Bitcoin nuked itself. That's what it did.
Yeah. So how's the? Now I see you're telling me to jump on with Shinobi. I'm sorry. I should have brought a
That
Reuben
wasn't a plan.
sandwich. I'm so devastated now. I didn't have a Reuben sandwich ready for you.
That wasn't a plan, but we were getting
I
into
hate you all.
OpCat. And why do you think Udi and those lot want this?
So why, if we're just rolling on the show then, why would they want this? I think they want to explore, let me give you, because there's plenty to like deride and mock about the idea of like all of the downsides of OpCat. To try and be fair and steelman their perspective on this, they want scaling solutions that are stepping outside the typical conversation and Overton window of how Bitcoiners talk about scaling today. We typically talk about payment channels. We talk about ways of like maybe sharing UTXOs. They want to be able to do something like bring Ethereum-like functionality and other advanced, more smart contracting capabilities to Bitcoin. And the comment has always been, the mental model has always been, well, Bitcoin's very constrained. It's a very simple programming language. We're not going to let that happen. But they want to be able to do things like zero knowledge proof rollups, which I'm not sure if you saw right before this podcast start. The Zero Sync team announced they figured out with BitVM how to do ZKP validation. Like this is like in the past hour.
Remember, this is what Bitcoin did.
Sorry. Let me explain it as if you were a fan of Tottenham. So Pete will love listening back to this. Basically, they want to be able to do way more advanced abstract ways of like think more traditional like Ethereum smart contracting computation. That's what they want to have, different assets that are just not Bitcoin. They want to be able to have tokens. They want to be able to do all of these different things. And maybe a lens you can view this through is like monetary maximalism versus platform maximalism.
This is what those terms.
I know you hate those terms, but like that's, I think, like you said, it's what Bitcoin did. The simplest way to bring this down to is like Bitcoin as a money versus Bitcoin as a platform. And this is what people in Counterparty were doing back in 2015, 2016. And they've been kind of tutted and pushed to the side. And I think this is kind of the resurgence of them in the narratives. And things like BitVM, if OpCat gets re-enabled, all of these different more advanced scaling things can come in there and kind of open up. The cat gets out of the bag.
All right, let's go back. Why do you think the conversation between developers on each side of this is completely broken down?
Why? I am of the opinion that a lot of people have visions on what they want to build. And since the forking process to add functionality to Bitcoin is so contentious and it takes years, everyone wants to get their thing added next. And because you want to get your thing added next, this is what you guys were saying, everyone wants their thing added next, they're in a position where they don't want to advocate for the advancement of something else, because then it means if someone gets their thing first, you have to push out what you want to build for years, right? If Bitcoin moves slow, it takes years. And I'm not sure if you mentioned this earlier, but like the last two forks and changes we had in Bitcoin were massive between SegWit and Taproot. Those are massive, big changes. And with those massive, big changes, had a lot of code, a lot of implications, a lot of thought and design around. In 2015 and 2016, we used to add opcodes like the time lock opcodes, and they weren't big contentious wars. They were just pretty straightforward things. And I think between the emotional and psychological scars everyone has from the block size wars, and now everyone's looking at what happened with Taproot as an unintended consequence with this unlimited script sizing, which was intended for large financial transactions where you can have really large arbitrary financial contracts that could be settled on chain up to the block size limit. that then becomes op0, op-if, and then you have JPEGs everywhere, right? They found a way to basically go around that intention for financial contracts. So everyone now is like really, really concerned that any change could just blow something up. I know I kind of meandered there. I'm also walking in on the spot. I wasn't prepared to jump in on this.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
Oh, here you go. You can get back in. There you go.
Recording, you carried on.
Musical chairs.
I explained it as if you're a fan of Tottenham. That's
It would be very rare for me to leave an interview for a phone call, but that was Alan Young from Bedfordshire FA. I've declared war on Bedford Council and the mayor.
Let's talk about it.
No, I've done it in another show. I'll tell you about
I
it
think
a bit
Opcat
afterwards.
fixes it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Go on.
So we were just talking about, Danny was asking, like, why do I think the developer process for making upgrades to Bitcoin's broken down? And it sounds like I just repeated what Shinobi said, was that everyone wants their thing next. And since things take years to add in Bitcoin, if my thing comes second, that means like 4 or 5 years before my thing gets added. And that's a painful thing to deal with.
Okay, so that comes back to my point. If this was a company, not a decentralized distributed protocol, you would have somebody at the top making the business case based on users and requirements that makes the most sense to do next. If I ran my company like that and the developers were arguing about what to do next, it would become a war. It would become who can put up the biggest argument for what they think. But usually they're not the right people to make a business case.
Well, now we're not really making technical arguments because I spent 7 hours on the road. The children decided that we're just going to meme each proposal now. So we're not even making technical arguments. We're just throwing cats at Reuben sandwiches and seeing which meme sticks.
I don't know if you want, I can explain that. Moon and Not, one of the mempool guys, made this joke post about how the quantum cats were doing opcat, and so he made like a bunch of fake like NFT drops, like the TX hash browns for TX hash, and there was a bunch of hash brown pictures, right? And I made a joke called Rubens for Reuben sandwiches for CTV proposals, and everyone started tweeting anthropomorphized sandwiches holding signs saying activate CTV. And this is all because Shinobi decided to drive here instead of fly, so he wasn't babysitting the children.
Yeah, I've heard about this 8-hour drive, for fuck's sake. I don't like the idea of changes being pushed through for the sake of trolling.
Did you
That
explain?
concerns me.
Did you guys talk about Bitplant? I know I'm coming into this conversation.
that we haven't got to.
So this is what it is. I've described, I think, a lot of what the Taproot Wizard guys are doing is it's a performance art. They're making a commentary on Bitcoin developer culture in many ways. And that's what Bitland was, which was this whole very silly, like almost like Candyland child board game where you flip coins and you see how you can get your proposal to the next step. And everyone had like, I'm looking at Adam's face right here. Like Adam was laughing about it. And a lot of it's poking fun at Blockstream. Like that's in the post and he was laughing about it. The problem is that it's resorting to trolling because any sort of highbrow effort to try and make any sort of appeal is just falling apart. Like, so if you can't have an adult means of conversation to try and progress a conversation forward, you're naturally going to devolve into breaking down of a discourse because no one can get any progress with anything. So then it becomes irreverent trolling.
Yeah, a bit like attempts to try and discuss the properties of Bitcoin with Peter Schiff have completely failed. So we all just troll him.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, look, to me, just like as an outside observer, I'm going to reiterate what I've said, is that there doesn't seem to be a layer of people within this decentralized distribute system who are the people who can make the right business case and can play the politics game that can bring people together. I said to Shinobi, I think it's a bit like US politics. You want the Republican nomination. You're Vivek Ramaswamy. No one knows who you are. You've got no popular support. You can go everywhere and put up better arguments than Trump. Sometimes it's better the devil you know. And so, that's why he came fourth in the vote, despite a lot of people liking him. But do you know what? He may end up being the VP because he's proved a case, but he cannot get things through on his own. So it feels like that. My observation is like Jeremy Rubin may not have carried the same weight as a Peter Willey, an Andrew Polstra, a Gregory Maxwell. And so he hasn't got that popular political support with the old guard. So the better the devil you know, it's like, let's stay away from it. It could be arbitrary and unfair, but that's my kind of observation.
Yeah, I think there's definitely two layers of the there's multiple layers of the consensus game. The two we're talking about though are the technical merits and the code being sound and understanding the design space of what it unlocks and changes, which is I know I got tagged in to talk about OpCat. OpCat really opens up a lot of potential things that are not just let me answer your question first. Yes, there's a political level of like social interaction, building emotional and psychological consensus of people like agreeing like this is the next best thing. And then there's also the technical merits. And I think as last I saw, like the BIP 119 code's been sitting there unchanged. Was there like one small thing that got changed in the past 2 years, like a line or two of code? Like it's nothing.
BIP 119.
That's CTV's
That's
code,
okay.
right? So like so the code's technically sound. There's a big bug binding out there. Was something claimed? I'm trying to remember. I wasn't prepared for the interview today, so I don't. I
You
didn't do
prepare for
research.
interviews?
I try to put on a good show for anyone who's going to go through the trouble of having to listen to me talk.
AJ.
Was it AJ that found something?
I wanna say.
Either
And
way,
then
either way.
It doesn't matter.
James.
It's largely it's largely a solid code base with no major objections being found. But then this is where I think the conversation then starts drifting a bit, being like, well, it's not powerful enough, right? And with the whole OpCat conversation, you see a lot of, very seasoned developers in Bitcoin that are actually pointing towards OpCat being closer to consensus or being closer to being activated than something like a CTV, because OpCat's more powerful. Also, like the things that I started tweeting about was like, we were talking to one of our buddies, like Moonsettler, where like he with OpCat, you can do drive chains. Apparently, I haven't like ran the code myself to check it out, but like conceptually may be able to have you do some sort of a drive chain. And that's where it gets.
That is where I'm confused, because the names I've heard that like OpCat want it to be added to the Bitcoin code seem like the ones who'd be smart enough to realize bringing MEV to Bitcoin is terrible. And I'm just going to repeat what Harry said to me yesterday. MEV is great for him as a miner, but it's horrible for Bitcoin.
Yes. Let me just, no one has explicitly advocated for OpCat activation. People, because OpCat is, just to be clear, I just want to be
explicitly.
No one, I want to be fair and charitable to this, right? So people, OpCat is active on Liquid. So people have built really powerful tools, like Barack built BitMatrix, which is like a Uniswap tool using OpCat on Liquid. It is not active on Bitcoin. The post that's been floating around is Andrew Polstra on a mailing list post said something to the effect of whenever he wants to do something interesting with Bitcoin script, 90% of the time, if he had OpCat, he'd be able to do it. And that OpCat is a very inefficient way of doing really advanced things, but it's like a tool that lets you prototype stuff. And he's made no comment on activation. So just to be clear, I just want to be fair. Like
the only people agitating in the direction of actually activating it at this point are the Taproot wizards.
Okay.
But like the Blockstream developers have discussed like reasons why they would want it or things that they could do with it for years.
But the wizards, my perception of the wizards would be they would care more about what they want to do with JPEGs than they care about the function of Bitcoin as money. And even if MEV is horrible and terrible for Bitcoin as money, they'd accept that to do their wizards or.
See, here's the thing though. Like, I don't think the JPEGs are all they care about. This is just a factor or like a mechanism to get what they want, which is more functionality. They want to just like play loose. Let's see what happens. Like, let's add all the things and see what people can build with it.
Bitcoin as the strong, like the whole reason why ordinals as a concept took off was because that data is going to live there forever, right? The Bitcoin blockchain is supreme. There is no second best, right? Like this is something that if the project works, will be here for hundreds and thousands of years. They want to be able to do all of the other things they want to do in the rest of crypto land and have it be able to come back to Bitcoin. So if you like think about high level, like
No, we get all that.
right. So then,
but
it's not just
care,
JPEGs.
yeah, but they don't care about the trade-off. The horrible trade-offs that might come with this.
I think I wouldn't know if they care or don't care. I think maybe they think in the risk-adjusted bets they would rather let the cat out of the bag than have Bitcoin stay the way it is right now.
Yeah, like I'd say it's fair to say I wouldn't say they ignore the risks or don't care about the risks. They just think that the benefits outweigh the risks.
So this this goes back to the culture point at the start of shifting away from move slow, don't break things to let's try some things and
Yeah, I mean, like, and to be clear, like there are developers in Bitcoin who have this frustration. Like I think Rob and Linus wants Opcat because it helps BitVM be more powerful, right? I think believe Stephen, who wrote the TX hash proposal, which is a more advanced version, like a CTV, it's a more advanced covenant, made a comment about like let's just activate Opcat. That's why I saw that. Like so, like there are developers in Bitcoin that you would consider Bitcoin developers that want this. So it's not something that's being like incepted into Bitcoin culture because of, you know, Udi and Eric running around in wizard robes, right? Like this is something that some developers want independent of whatever they were going to say anyway.
Are there any money maximalists that want this? Genuine money maximalists?
None that I can think of off the top of my head.
No, I mean, but they also don't even want covenants, right? They just don't want anything. They're more.
Do they not want covenants? They just don't want it just yet in its current flavor.
I don't think they want them at all.
I think they want pure ossification. I think the idea of change is scary, and people don't want to make any more changes to the network, and that's their privacy, and that's a whole other branch of a conversation to go down. But I think they don't even want to touch anything.
I mean, I empathize with that. Bitcoin does everything I need right now. It does
until the fees keep going up.
Yeah. If the fees keep going up, my wealth goes up with it. So I can still afford it. Now, as a money maximalist who cares about other people using the network, I'm very interested now in CTV. I don't technically understand it, but if you explain to me it can do what I think it can do, then I think that's very cool.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this recently because I was neutral on CTV during the whole activation thing. I didn't know enough, and to even be formally like honest, like I'm actually formally neutral on drive chains because I haven't read all of Paul's stuff and I haven't read Shinobi's responses to all of it. Like I understand the high level thing, but I haven't actually spent the time to read it.
Do we really need drive chains?
You are dead to me.
Do we really need drive chains?
No.
I as of right now, after talking to you, I see the huge changes in the game theory network incentives, and hearing Harry talk about it last night, I take that all very seriously. I'm just being very honest and transparent as I haven't read I haven't read his website. So like, I'm not going to say with full conviction, I will never be for them, but it sounds like in the conversations we've been having over the past like week or two that it would be a no for me. But again, I want to at least, Paul's put a lot of thought and effort. I want to at least read the words that he said before I want to think for myself.
Fair enough.
As for like the CTV, like for CTV's enablement, I was neutral on all of the stuff that was going on at the time of those activation conversations. And I was told that it was going to cause government blacklists, like the digital panopticon on chain, and didn't have any working coder examples. And a lot of people told me this that I thought understood how Bitcoin worked more than me, and then kind of slowly walking through and reading for myself and seeing for myself that there were full examples, things being fleshed out, that the code was stable, that it can't do this government blacklist thing that everyone keep like fudding about. I started just realizing I need to kind of go through all these things myself, and I'm of the opinion that it would be able to help scale, whereas otherwise right now everyone who's talking about like I want to be I don't want Bitcoin to change are just going to end up being first class citizens for a wide swath of people who will never be able to have any sort of sovereign relationship with Bitcoin. It's very self-serving to say today nothing changes because I'm already here and I got my bag.
Well, this is the thing I said to Shinobi earlier. The people who are against CTV are probably the people who will always be self-sovereign because they'll be able to control UTXOs. So it's I put self-sovereignty for me, but not for thee kind of situation, because is the fear the unknown. So for example, with Taproot, we didn't realize we would get ordinals, did we? It kind of came down the line after. We get ordinals now.
Well, Taproot didn't enable ordinals. That's the tracking, like the magical sats that has been possible since day one of Bitcoin.
Yep.
What Taproot gave us was the writing the large arbitrary data.
But that was an unknown, right?
But it didn't even do that. Like a few things to go through. Taproot did not enable inscriptions. It just enabled larger inscriptions that could be up to the full block size limit. And that has always been possible. It's just you would have had to make like larger transactions and break things up more.
But either way, it was an unknown.
It wasn't though. It wasn't. The ability to make a witness in a transaction that was the full block size limit is explicitly defined in BIP 342 as part of Taproot.
So
Like
this
that
was-
was right there
okay.
in the BIP.
So
what was the
that's-
unknown that came out of Taproot? then?
The unknown that came out of Taproot was that someone like Casey was going to come along and do basically pack a bunch of arbitrary data into that if. And to Shinobi's point, it says literally in the BIP that you can make a transaction up to the size of a block.
Okay,
So then what the switch was instead of it being a really big multi-sig or a really big advanced like on-chain contract, it was just pushing arbitrary data to get JPEGs.
And your fear with OpCat is that every upgrade afterwards is going to be a hell of a lot of work to understand what the interaction that is with OpCat and what crazy shit you can do. And so do we think potentially the fear with CTV is the unknown? Some people are like, we just don't know what this might bring that we're not prepared for.
See, it's not the fear of the unknown. It is the active belief in something that is factually, demonstrably not true, and the refusal to look at all the evidence showing that this is just not true. The government whitelisting nonsense.
So I think there's three parts of this. There's definitely that part where people just in bad faith, either for will through ignorance or just haven't learned yet things that are just not true. There's also people that will down talk something like a CTV because it's not their proposal or it's not everything they want right now. And because of that, they will talk it down in an effort to try and create political lobbying for what they would like to have in Bitcoin, whether that's any of the other opcodes, right? Just to be clear, it could be anyone. And then I think there's a third leg of people who just don't want Bitcoin to change. So like literally there is no amount because every single idea will have unknown unknowns. Like you can't prove the space of the unknown. It by definition of it being an unknown, you can't know all of the things.
Yeah.
So you can say that for every single thing that ever happened in Bitcoin. You could have made that same argument for relative time locks and SegWit, and we never would have had the Lightning Network, right? So like you do have an unquantifiable trade-off in what you do not get by making those upgrades. Because the same argument for CTV being an unknown, you can make with SegWit, which is a much bigger chain than CTV, not have the Lightning Network, and we could have a Bitcoin right now that doesn't even have a Lightning Network if we went down that other path. And so it's the broken window fallacy. You don't get to see the other side of what happens if you do activate that, what possible positive things could come.
Yep, fair. Okay, what needs to happen now? Well, I think
the
I know.
sandwiches need to beat the cats in the meme war. That's where we're at right now.
Like, who do we need? Like some old school, old guard person to back down and support this?
I mean, let me know your thoughts. I think actively just starting these conversations. I think building actual full demos at this point. There's a lot of code that's been sitting there from the last time it was trying to be activated. Dusting it off, showing some live working demos, presenting it at BitDevs, just starting a social conversation, getting people aware of it. We talked about it last night at BitDevs, was very well received. There was also some misinformation about government whitelist stuff that we were able to quickly just put aside. And I think just making it feel safe to talk about and be supportive of it, because I think here's actually, again, I wasn't prepared to come in today. I think a lot of people in the content creation space in Bitcoin don't want to be someone who's even hinting at any of this stuff. So you actually have a freezing effect among those with the largest megaphones. They don't even, everyone wants to be neutral on everything. No one wants to be seen as like rocking the boat. So it actually has to be a really grass up emergent thing and not coming from people that do content creation or are on social media often, because it becomes a really quick, easy thing for people to like ostracize you and dunk on you and get points over on by just even opening the conversation like, hey, maybe Bitcoin could add something.
So we're going to get dunked on for doing this.
I bet by some small chunk of people.
I mean, there'll always be haters on the internet.
Yeah, we don't care about that. I mean, look, I'm going to open it up to Adam and anyone else who wants to talk about this. Andrew Polstra.
I mean, like, I think also just another like thing that needs to get addressed from like the wider perception of things is like, just because you have been a developer in the Bitcoin space longer than some other developer, that does not just mean you are right, that you understand things better. Like I have seen people who just like deeply got involved in this space in the last year or two who understand things better than people who've been here 10 years. Like the amount of time you have contributed to Bitcoin is not the magical sole arbiter of how good your understanding of it is.
But you still have to play the political game and build consensus, right? And so, you have to be able to extend an olive branch, be able to have kind of like a ceasefire, and just try and like reset the terms, and try everyone putting their own personal objectives aside and thinking about what's best for Bitcoin in the long run.
Is Jeremy still keen? Because I know, was there a moment he was almost like felt like he was walking away?
He doesn't want to accept it yet and acknowledge it, but he's back.
Yeah, good.
He's back.
Because I felt like he was like, I felt like I don't want to say rage quit, but like he was like just drained by the process.
I mean, I don't blame him at all. Like the shit that he got, like smeared and like insults against his character, his motivations, was unacceptable. And I say that as somebody who will just throw out the word we agreed I wouldn't use on the show today without even thinking about it if I think you are being an idiot or arguing in bad faith or you're wrong about something. Like Jeremy and the shit that he got, there was not even a rational, like logical place for that to come from. Right. It was just pure like character smearing and assassination.
Well, look, we'll get this out there. I'll reach out to people at Blockstream for comments, see if they want to join, or we'll reach out to Jeremy if we can add anything to support this in any way. Then we will. If we're not helping, then we'll shut the fuck up. But yeah, appreciate you coming in, Shinobi. Appreciate you stealing Danny's chair. Double anchor.
Can't replace him.
No. All right. Cool. Good work, guys. Nice one.